Hello everyone. Today we'll be discussing about 60 possible questions for doctoral research or PhD presentation. These 60 questions have been emerged from many different sources like textbook, internet, and many other sources. Another thing, the answers that we will be discussing today, those are not absolute answers because these are only the ideas maybe you can get from the discussion. Of course, you have your own answers and we can merge together with your ideas and the idea that we'll be discussing today. Yes, in one sentence it can be summarized. Basically, it is the same thing like your research title, only add on your methodology part, like by utilizing whatever methodology and blah 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 blah. That's all. In case they ask the question, we know how to answer this. Only add on by utilizing quantitative research or qualitative research, blah 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 blah, and that's it. Ideas that bind together, basically they are asking about problem statements. So you can focus on the main ideas that you have presented a little bit in background of the study and problem statement. You just say out what are the things or ideas that creates the need or that create the need, because if you have many ideas for this research. Motivation and inspiration, basically again problem statement. This is the need or the research gap that requires to conduct this research or this research to be conducted. Main issues and debates, again, you can talk about the problem statement perspective, especially the local problem or industry basis problem. Let's say you are discussing about Malaysia or Indonesia or Australia or whatever country, maybe Sri Lanka or Maldives. So you discuss about those are the ideas and especially issues and debates, what's happening out there. So this is basically, of course, a part of problem statement. You can highlight that. Same thing, this is another question from problem statement. You can highlight what are the main things or issues that you are addressing. This is very straight cut question, so almost the same thing. And mind it, the questions that we have discussed so far that can indicate problem statement, they will not be asking again and again same types of questions, but these are the possible ways to ask this question about problem statement. This is basically a kind of the problem statement, but in the flavor of significance of the study. So that why this research is important, or because we know that problem statement and significance of the study, these two sections are reciprocal section. So you have to highlight a little bit about problem statement at the same time, the importance or the significance of the study. Significance of the study. Of course, we discuss about the expected contribution and the parties or groups or people or sector, whatever, how they can get benefit out of this research. So they are basically asking about those sort of things. Research questions, they have emerged from the problem statement, and you need to highlight the things that you are trying to explore and how they are linked to it, the problem statement sections. So we can say out those are the highlighted parts of this problem statement, and that's how these research questions have been emerged. Question number 10, it is somehow a reciprocal question of the previous one. Research questions and objectives, so you know they are the same thing, similar thing. You can answer in the same way. Okay, for this question, two things are very important. Number one, whether it is sufficient, and number second, whether it is updated. I would recommend you, if possible, try to do something like meta-analysis. If you're not sure what is meta-analysis, you can refer to your textbook or internet. Meta-analysis is something you are actually listing down from the beginning of the subject area till now. So what are the other researchers they have found from the beginning of this subject area that have been discussed till today? If you have that table, I think you can tackle this question so easily. As we know that this is local literature. Of course, if you talk about, for example, service quality of banking, definitely you have all literature support from many other countries, and of course the country that you are trying to explore, maybe the country that you discuss in your research, that is called local literature. Make sure that you have sufficient local literature. Definitely you have taken all of the ideas that have been discussed in the literature by many other researchers. But as a researcher, definitely you have your own understanding and analogy that can enhance and create the platform of this research. To do that, you didn't copy and paste the literature. And of course, from Turnitin perspective, which is called plagiarism perspective, it is not acceptable. That's how we can argue with this question, that many different sources, you have taken the ideas, but for execution part is yours. Okay, coherent. What is that? You may know that coherence and fragmentation, right? Coherence means continuation. Of course, yes, this research has been written from coherence perspective and there was no fragmentation. So you can argue that how your research has been written coherently. And of course, from your supervisor perspective, day by day, he or she has given many different ideas, and of course you have written many things again and again just to make the continuation of your research, right? So of course it is written coherently. Of course, because we know that literature review is written from two different perspectives. One is called empirical review, another one is called theoretical review. So our write-up is justified from empirical perspective and theoretical perspective. So this question is very easy to handle. All right, we have to be a little smart in answering this question. You just remember a few, maybe 2, 3 or something like that, at least the researcher's name and the year. And in case they ask, let's say you are measuring the performance of the firm or industry or sector, I believe you know the differences among these three or whatever, right? So you need to know the guru, the main researchers of this field about measuring that particular thing you are trying to figure out, right? So this is the way, number one. Number second, your literature review chapter definitely has a clear explanation or the table form that who are the researchers, they have talked about that. So I don't think so you will face difficulties in answering this question. Again, for this, you need to remember especially about 3, 4 or 5 papers or researcher's name. In case they ask without going through or flipping through your thesis, if you can answer immediately, it will create a good impression among the examiners. By doing our research, literature review, an extensive literature review, right? So definitely we have those informations. In case they ask, I don't think so. This is something rocket science to answer this question. Research framework. Sometimes we call it conceptual framework. Conceptual framework is emerged from empirical perspective and theoretical perspective. It is justified the variables of the framework and relationships between and among variables. Everything is justified. What you can do, you can refer to another video in Tubeducation called Conceptual Framework, and from that video at least you can have some ideas how the conceptual framework is formed, right? So definitely our conceptual framework is formed from empirical perspective and theoretical perspective. Same thing. In case they're asking about conceptual framework or research framework, they're asking in different way. This is more straight cut way. Again, if we have clear idea about our conceptual framework, of course we need to have. So I don't think so to handle this question we will face difficulties. Straight cut question, dependent variable, and how to measure this dependent variable and whether this dependent variable can reflect our research. Of course, this is something what we are looking to measure this. And if we can measure this, yes, we achieve our objectives. Most of the objectives we can achieve by measuring our dependent variable, right? So in case they ask, how did you find this from literature perspective? How would you measure this? Of course, by instrumentation that we have gotten from many other researchers. In chapter 3, we have written the instrumentation of measurement items. So that's how we can measure this. So I don't think so this is a very tough question to answer. Independent variables, the same thing. Same way we can answer this. Alright, this question is basically instrumentation of measurement item. Whether your questionnaire, the items of the questionnaire, they are adopted, adapted, or developed. Again, adopted with O, adapted with A, and developed. We know that what is developed. If we are not sure what are those, please refer to the textbook. So basically, they're asking whose scale you're using, whether you have created your own questions or items. I think this is very easy because it is clearly written in chapter 3. Moderating variable. If you have moderating variable, just say it out why they are moderating variable. Of course, you have literature support. I don't think so. It's a difficult question to answer. Number 26, intervening variable is basically your mediating variable. Again, it is a kind of straight cut questions, but one thing to be noted, in case they ask what is full mediation and what is partial mediation, and after analyzing this, whether it is full mediation or partial mediation and how to justify this part, please take care. You have to know what are those. Expected relationships, basically we know that there are two types of relationship. One is called cause and effect relationship. Another one is called correlation. But in conceptual framework, we usually use one arrow, right? So one arrow refers cause and effect relationship. Again, this relationship can be either positive or negative. You can refer to your hypothesis, whether it is stated there like positive relationship or negative relationship. That means directional hypothesis, or it is in non-directional hypothesis, right? So by doing so, we can justify this. If positive, why? If there is no indication whether positive or negative, again, why? We know that homogeneous model, that means all relationships are homogeneous, like all positives or all negatives. But if it is not stated, that means literature did not support whether it is positive or negative. We are not sure about that. This unsure statement creates non-directional hypothesis. I think we can justify this from literature perspective. I think we have discussed already hypothesis. Make sure that usually we use not null hypothesis but alternative hypothesis in our research. That is why we talk about p-value. If more than 0.05, we don't accept that because we are using alternative hypothesis. This is an understanding. But again, I think somehow we have discussed in the previous question how to tackle this hypothetical question. Question number 29, I think the same thing we have discussed. They will be asking different perspectives. In case they ask this question, we know how to handle this. Unit of analysis. I believe this is very straight question, and if we have the idea about unit of analysis, I don't think so it will be a difficult question to answer. Of course, unit of analysis, we need to measure whether this is a well-reflected questions, because if you talk about the group, make sure that your respondents is the someone who can represent on behalf of the group, or if it is an industry, can represent on behalf of the industry. But if it is individual, I don't think so there will be any question from the examiners. Population. This is very important question. In case they ask about population, we need to know about study population, target population, survey population, and after that sample, and of course sampling technique. The next one will be about sampling technique. We need to make sure that it is well discussed in a thesis and well presented during your presentation, that your sample is a well representation of your population. And make sure that sampling technique, we need to discuss about the sampling technique, whether it is a random sampling or non-random sampling, which is called probability sampling or non-probability sampling, and what kind of probability sampling is this, or what kind of non-probability sampling is this. We need to clarify and justify with rationales very clearly. This is very important question, and many students even they fail because they can't answer this question clearly and they don't have idea what are those. Make sure that it is well organized and it is quite clear while you'll be answering this question. Yes, of course, research is not only monotonous or one single path. We have many different ways to do that. Qualitative research, quantitative research, this is one thing. And even quantitative research you do, for example, we have many other ways to measure this. You need to mention those who, especially those who are related to your research, and you need to justify definitely why you have chosen this, because this is the best among all other alternatives. Why? I think you have written in chapter 3, especially in justification part. Same thing, you just explain and convince them, to the examiners, why it is the best alternatives. Let's say you do 5-point Likert scale or 7-point Likert scale, definitely they will ask. If you use 5, they will ask why not 7? It will give you an extensive measurement compared to 5. If you use 7, they will say, no, the respondents will get confused because you have a lot of alternatives. So you need to know how to answer them. Now, neither one is incorrect, either 5 or 7. And of course, you have justification. You can refer to any research methodology book. You can find a lot of justifications that supports why 5-point Likert scale and why a 7-point Likert scale. So you can find justifications. So if you have 5 or 7, be prepared that how to convince them. Number 36, of course, it is not too long, not too short. It is just sufficient enough to justify the items in terms of the variables, and that can achieve our research objectives. Just say out like this way. Statistical tool. This is very important question, and you can use any software. You can use SPSS, AMOS, eViews, Smart PLS, NVivo for qualitative research, or whatever. I mean, if it is a statistical part, you can define, yes, the software can justify your descriptive and inferential statistics, and that's all about it. This is only the justification why this tool is sufficient, that can justify your research. Ethical part can be from two different perspectives. One is from your university perspective. Of course, you have filled up your ethical form, and from your perspective that you personally as a researcher did not make any harm or did not go beyond the regulations or rules set by the university, and that's all. Okay, research topic and research title, two different things. They are entirely different. Not entirely different, somehow they are different, right? Research topic is a broader perspective, and title exactly the sentence is written on your research or thesis book, right? Yes, over the time there are some deviations, but main target has not been changed. You can say out like this. Of course, this is an academic research, and this research has followed all the academic regulations and criteria. And of course, as an evaluation perspective, as an evaluator, of course, this research is on the top. Yes, findings are correct because the measurement was correct, the statistical tool correctly used, and definitely the findings, the output that we got from the statistical tool or the software should be correct. This is one perspective. Another perspective we can justify, yes, we have followed, or this research has followed all the possible methods and techniques, and that's how these findings should be correct. Strongest part is like you have followed all the possible ways and criteria of this research, of an academic research. Finding out the gap, create the need of this research, set the objective, and based upon that you found out the literature review, and from the literature review perspective also you have created the framework, justified the framework from empirical perspective and theoretical perspective, check the hypothesis, and of course this is the strongest part of this research. Weakest part, again, this one you have to be a little smart. You have to say the limitations, like time limitations or the limitations of the data, something like that. But make sure that it is not really the weakness. It is something supporting thing that is called limitation perspective, and that's how you can again justify your research that there is no weakness. But again, by saying the weakness, you are showing there is no weakness. Be smart on this, answering this question. Okay, this one again, when we recommend recommendations of the future study or further study, so you can pick some of the points from there and you can justify this research, how it can be improved further. In what extent this contribution be generalized? I think you have discussed in chapter 5. So these contributions can be generalized, or these findings can be generalized from that perspective. I think it is quite a straight-cut question you can find out. Future researchers, especially the limitations of this research have been highlighted in chapter 5, and further researcher, so they will be interested because the place that you have stopped, they will be studying from that point. Of course, the research is a continuous process. Again, relevance perspective, you can justify from the further research perspective. Practitioner, again, from that perspective, because it is written quite clearly in chapter 5, managerial implication, that section, right? So I don't think so. This is a hard question. Good journals, ISI, now no longer ISI, maybe they called Web of Science or Scopus, Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. So try to relate your research area and some of the journals you can link with, and that's how we can answer this question. I think this is very straight-cut question, and it is quite clearly written in end of chapter 4 or beginning of chapter 5, especially the summary of the findings, that section in chapter 5. So I don't think so. This is a very difficult question. Because these findings can fill up the gap of the current problems that is discussed in chapter 1 under problem statement section. And you can discuss a little bit about contribution perspective. So easy one. Very straight question. So the gap of the literature can be fulfilled by this research. How? Written in chapter 5. Contributions, please refer to your thesis. We have methodological contribution, theoretical contribution, practical contribution. Those are the things that actually they are asking by this question. Yes, contribution, how long? Definitely sustainable contribution until any further researchers come and explore. Main achievement, definitely any research, we have two keywords. Number one is called novelty, what's new here, and number second is the contribution. And by answering from that perspective, I think you can handle this question. This is very interesting question. PhD is a journey, doctoral journey, and we can talk about different perspectives. Academic perspectives is something like following the things to achieve the target, by following the regulations of the university, number one, by following the norm of the research from academic perspective, by following even the self-discipline perspective. It depends how you can explain this, and it depends on the questions. I mean, during that momentum, from what perspective they're asking this question, I think you will understand this and answer from that perspective. Okay, this is something from your perspective. It depends on how you'd like to answer this. Are you going to answer this one from your own perspective, from your own experience or tacit knowledge perspective, or from academic perspective? So you pick it up and you decide how to answer this. But if you talk about academic perspective, definitely discipline, the following, the way of following things, something like that. It's basically, this is a kind of testing question to you. How would you handle this question? Very clear question. They talk about limitations of the study and further research or future research. Just provide some of the ideas that can convince examiners. Alright, this is very tricky question. They are creating the trap and waiting for you to step into the trap. Make sure that you handle this question very sincerely. Limitations, yes, you have shown the limitations to the examiners, but again, remember this, limitations and constraint, they are not the same thing. So you just say out like this, limitations and constraint, they are not the same thing. Since this research has followed from the problem statement, blah, 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 setting objectives, following the literature review, empirical, theoretical, coming up the formulation of the framework, hypothesis, well-managed procedures to collect the data, sampling, all, it discuss about all. That is correctly done until the findings that can contribute towards blah, 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 blah. Since it has the huge contribution towards the body of knowledge, definitely this research can claim the academic recognition, which is called PhD. Since this research has followed all the possible ways and optimal ways of achieving the research objectives that can fulfill the existing gap, which have been discussed in problem statement section. So that's how. It's about how smartly you can handle them. Done the 60 questions? Yes, that's all. If you are smart enough to answer those questions very sincerely with logic and rationals, I don't think so they will pull you back to get the PhD. So you are a doctor now. Mind it, these are only the possible questions. You may find some other questions or many other angle of asking questions. Don't get confused. Try to make yourself calm, keep calm, understand, and answer logically. Good luck to you.